Hi. As we look at modern-day canyon country, we see a community that has grown over many decades. Once a rural community with cattle and homesteaders, today we have a population of 36,000 people, tucked in between urban sprawl and subdivisions. Historically, the agricultural community of canyon country was tucked in between the industrial communities of Saugus and Valencia. Contemporary canyon country got its name in the late 1960s. Before then, it had been known as Soledad. The region was known for cattle, sheep, chicken ranches, as well as fruit orchards and vegetable farms. This agricultural community sustained itself through the Depression and created a prideful identity in canyon country. That richness goes beyond the canyon country chamber frontier days and is steeped in the history and innovation of the American 19th century ethos of determination and commitment to self, family, and community. That spirit still continues.
History in canyon country is rich with fossils, artifacts, minerals, and oil. Vast geological changes have resulted in panoramic peaks and valleys covered with oaks, scrub brush, buckwheat, and aromatic white sage. The first recorded discovery of gold in California by Juan Francisco de Gracia Lopez on March 17, 1842, the Oak of the Golden Dream and Placerita Canyon. Canyon country was the western edge of the nation's wild, wild west. History abounds with tales of bandits, grizzly bears, honeybees, gold mines, railroads, Native Americans, and movie stars. The earliest history begins with the animals and sea life which inhabited the land 7 to 10 million years ago. Hidden within Placerita and Sand Canyons are gold, white kerosene, and ancient fossil sea life. Sand Canyon was once the ancient Malibu. In fact, buried within the recesses of Sand Canyon is a whale which lived between 7 and 10 million years ago. Canyon country was the edge of the ancient shoreline, and in time, Native Americans slowly migrated into the region. The Tatavians, known as the dwellers of sunny slopes, arrived about 500 AD and were known as rugged and fierce mountain dwellers. The tribe occupied about 24 villages throughout the upper Santa Clarita region, including Vasquez Rocks. Tatavians lived off the land and are remembered today through their basket weaving, rock art, and stone artifacts. The last full-blooded Tatavian, Juan Fustero, died in 1921, which created a great loss in the transmission of their culture and language. With time, the demographic makeup of the valley changed, with the influx of Spaniards, homesteaders, and fortune seekers. Some of the homesteaders in canyon country are names still recognized today, like Mitchell, Chakanaka, Ritter, Dyer, Warmuth, Rainier, Walker, Held, Nadeau, Lang, Craig, Wright, Shaefer, and Johnson. These families settled between the years 1860 and 1917. Other famous names include Tiburcio Vasquez, William S. Hart, Tom Mix, Fred Kohler, Richard Dix, Yachima Canute, Monty Montana, and Walter and Ruth Bogger. And one of the more humble residents, but well-recognized businessmen, Andy Gump. Some of these families settled in or around legendary Vasquez Rocks. Besides its bandit folklore, Vasquez Rocks became a homestead, social meeting place, and fabulous movie locale. The rocks were deeded by Woodrow Wilson November 1919 to homesteader Henry Craig. Craig planted pear and apple trees in a 5-acre orchard. Craig initially worked as a borax miner, shoring timbers to support tunnels going into the mine, including the one at Vasquez Rocks. Claude Ellis, a well-remembered artist and friend of Craig's, left behind his mark painted on the rocks. His son Bill later became a vaudeville performer. Next door to the rocks was the AAA Ranch owned by Jefferson Asher and Emily Penter, a former actress. The ranch hosted parties with the elite of Hollywood. The fun of the Wild Wild West was exhibited to guests, especially posing with the unfortunate bobcat, which froze to death on their porch. However, the most infamously remembered of people to the area was the California bandit Tiburcio Vasquez. Vasquez served 3 jail terms before he was hung for first-degree murder relating to a robbery carried out at Tres Pinos December 23, 1873. Vasquez mined for gold in the San Gabriel Mountains with his brother Francisco. Typically, when practicing his banditry skills, he would ride over the Tujunga and Newhall passes into the Santa Clarita Valley. Although a bandit, Vasquez was very popular among the Californio population, since he represented their rage against the invading Americans. In fact, this is one reason he eluded the law for so long. To many, Vasquez was a guerrilla freedom fighter, or 19th century Robin Hood. The lore of Vasquez legend continued to grow as newcomers arrived to the valley. People arrived first by foot and on horseback, followed by rail and automobile. In 1769, the first wave of new visitors to our valley began with Gaspar de Portola and Father Juan Crespi. Much later, many settlers traveled on State Highway 6, known today as Sierra Highway, which was built in 1939. Sierra Highway became the hub of canyon country traveling up Mint Canyon. Mint Canyon and Soledad Canyon intersected to create what is remembered today as Solomon Junction. The area soon prospered with gas stations, inns, and restaurants. At the corner was the Solomon store, which sold black market supplies difficult to obtain during World War II. Gas stations were few and far between. The Oaks Garage was one of those few places where travelers could fill up their gas tanks and grab a soda and a smoke. The gas station later became a dining place, recognized today as the 4-star French restaurant, Le Chien. However, one of the most notable local landmarks on Sierra Highway was the Honey House. In the early 1940s, Willis Dyer purchased the property and began constructing a rock and concrete building facing State Highway 6. By 1954, with the help of his family, Willis' dream became a reality. He opened a honey processing plant, which included a retail and wholesale store. Over the years, the family produced tons of honey sold locally and internationally, which was especially prized by honey connoisseurs for its light color. In 1968, local beekeepers, Marge and Joe Warmuth, purchased the business. College of the Canyons now owns the property and has turned it into its College of the Canyons Canyon Country campus. Farther south on Highway 6, where Fair Oaks is located today, was the Agajanian hog farm. Once settled in the valley, residents mined for gold and borax, drilled for oil, worked on the railroads, established schools, and created theme parks. From almost the moment gold was discovered in Placerita Canyon, what was then referred to as the Soledad became a draw for fortune seekers, at first from Mexico. After the area was annexed by the United States, they started coming in greater numbers. Working the dry creek beds yielded too little for American miners. The work involved with dry panning exceeded the value of the gold, and they soon started prospecting in nearby canyons. Even in places that had enough surface water for traditional panning, like Soledad Canyon, the profit didn't seem to satisfy the newcomers. They began to take their search for gold more seriously by launching into hard rock mining. Claims sprouted up all over the Soledad. Some of the mines did yield significant amounts of gold. Pictured here is the New York mine, showing the kind of work that was needed for the larger haul. And here is the Red Rover mine. This name was preserved as a road with an exit off the Antelope Valley Freeway. The inside of the mine was dark and dangerous, but worth the risk to the miners and their dreams. After the ore was removed from the mine, the next job was to separate the rock from the gold. The early Arastra was powered by animal and later by machine. The Arastra was run by a steam engine with a wheel that crushed the ore. Other methods included a stamp mill to break up the ore by pounding it. One of the mines in the Soledad was named the Governor, after its owner, California Governor Henry Gage. One of the miners that was drawn to the Soledad was Thomas Mitchell. He traveled from Texas. When he got to California, he met the Taylor family and took an interest in their young daughter Martha. He offered to pay for her education if he could marry her when she came of age. Mitchell chose a property along the Santa Clara River in Soledad Canyon and had originally built a shack, but when he and Martha were married, he built a larger adobe home. As his family grew, he built an even larger Victorian home and used the adobe as the kitchen. He had paid for Martha's education in order to acquire an educated wife who could make certain that his children would be taught to read and write, skills he considered important to a person's success in life. Since the Lang family also had children, they took turns having class at both homes. The adobe kitchen of the Mitchell home was the beginning of school in Canyon Country. As people moved in, they accepted new students, and it wasn't long before it was necessary to build a real school, and the Sulphur Springs School District was born. The Victorian house was abandoned, and while the Santa Clarita Valley Historical Society tried to save it, it was destroyed. The adobe was later used for storage and began to deteriorate. However, the society was able to salvage most of the adobe bricks and the rocks from the fireplace. They were numbered and moved to Heritage Junction, where they are maintained and can be appreciated by visitors today. The only thing left to remind us of the Mitchell family on the site itself is the family cemetery. John Lang is remembered for killing a 2,300-pound grizzly bear in the valley. It was possibly the last one in Southern California. The Lang family resided nearby at the site of Lang Station. Near the train station, Lang developed a resort hotel of sorts, taking advantage of some natural springs that were in the vicinity. Lang Station has an important place in California railroad history. This map illustrates the state of railroading in Los Angeles County in the late 1870s. By the time this map was published, things had changed. The last station before entering Soledad Canyon was located at what we now know as the intersection of Magic Mountain Parkway and San Fernando Road. The first Newhall station was built there in 1876, but was moved to what is now Market and Railroad when it was found that water was more reliable in what is now Newhall. This station burned down in the 1960s. In 1887, the Saugus Station was built on the same foundation as the original Newhall Station, with toll-free's eating house and depot hotel to serve travelers waiting for a connection to or from the line that went to Ventura. In 1929, only a year and a half after the St. Francis Dam disaster, and less than a month after the stock market crash that began the Great Depression, Tom Vernon got out of prison for the 5th time. This photo is of a younger Tom. He planned a train robbery, apparently as an effort to get put back into jail. He removed some of the spikes from the tracks next to the rodeo grounds, just past the Saugus Station, and waited on the side of the hill for a locomotive to come by that was heavy enough to derail. The owl cruised by with no effect. But the San Joaquin wasn't so lucky. Vernon got up to rob the passengers, but to his displeasure, found that they were all getting out of their cars to see what was going on. Tom calmed them down and told them a relief engine was on its way. He got them all back into the passenger car, which had not derailed, and then proceeded to rob them. he made his escape on foot with his loot, a whopping $300. In the background of this photo, you can clearly see the rodeo grounds. This photo shows the site as it is today, with the swap meet replacing the rodeo grounds. This is now the site of the Santa Clarita Metrolink station. Beyond that, there were a series of whistle stops, including Kent, as marked on the map, but also Humphreys and Hanby later on. Lang was the next real station. It has an important meaning in the history of not just Santa Clarita, but the state of California. The Southern Pacific Railroad created the first Trans-California Railroad in 1876 by starting one team of laborers laying track from San Francisco going south, and another laying track going north from Los Angeles. But they finally met and drove a golden spike on September 5, 1876, at what is now Lang Station, named for John Lang, who lived there. The station marked a critical change in the way Californians got from place to place. Before this railroad came through, to get between San Francisco and Los Angeles, you had to board a ship or endure a grueling overland trip on the roads. Goods now could be moved easily. Equipment from the Pennsylvania oil fields made it possible to drill for oil in California for the first time. Lumber could now be brought from Northern California to build homes and businesses more easily. Transportation was made easier, opening up the area for new people to come in. But, in the late 1970s, this landmark was torn down, leaving only a couple of rock monuments to mark the spot where it stood. The next station along the line was Ravenna. It was a small station between Lang and Acton, but again, when it was no longer needed, it was torn down. The last station in the canyon was Acton, a tiny station. The town was at times quite bustling, and as seen today. In 1903, there was a shootout between Norman Melrose and William Bloom within sight of the Acton station, reminding us that even in the 20th century, outposts of civilization could be dangerous. And not just from dangerous people. There were also natural disasters. Here we see a train with its crew repairing track after a devastating flood in 1891. Because of the luxury of a train nearby, Sterling Borax Mine flourished in Tick Canyon. No 20-mule teams here for the borax, although teams were used in other places. Managed by the very interesting Thomas Thorkildsen, this narrow-gauge engine pulled borax from the processing building to Lang Station, where it was loaded onto a standard gauge car and shipped off. Near the upper reaches of Tick Canyon was the mine itself and the works. Borax came out of the mine, seen here up and to the right, and came down to a chute to the works. Below, going towards Lang, there was a little town that formed, inhabited by the workers at the Sterling Borax Mine. After being processed, the borax was loaded onto the narrow-gauge train and traveled down the canyon to Lang Station. The miners were a hardy, hard-working group, and they loved their time off. Thought that traffic jams in the Santa Clarita Valley were a new thing? This traffic jam in 1928 was made up of folks trying to get to the rodeo grounds. After 1930, they might have held a ticket that looked like this one. Hoot Gibson, the famous cowboy star, bought the Baker Roundup grounds, otherwise known as the Saugus Swap Meet. And here is Hoot, welcoming people to the rodeo. From above, the grounds would have looked like this at this time. The place drew famous cowboys like Tom Mix, who had created Mixville and Newhall for film production. His equally famous friend, Toney the Wonder Pony, is also remembered. It also drew rodeo performers, including Clyde Hamilton Smythe, in the upper right of this photo. His son, H. Clyde Smythe, was the superintendent of the Hart School District and a city council member. His grandson, Cameron, went to the California State Legislature. Time marched on and the rodeo grounds hosted more modern entertainment, like car racing, the circus, and a number of other entertainment events. But the rodeo theme stuck with Canyon Country after the Canyon Country Chamber of Commerce created its signature event, Frontier Days. Originally, Mission Village was designed in the 1920s as Ramona Village by Robert Callahan to cash in on the Ramona mania that continued to be the rage all over the country. It opened in Culver City during the Great Depression. It was the first theme park in California. In the early 1960s, it was relocated to Sierra Highway between Canyon Country and Agua Dulce and renamed Callahan's Old West when Interstate 10 was planned to run through the property. It had an eclectic mix of all things Old West, like the artifacts here from the Bucket of Blood Saloon in Virginia City, and the table where Wild Bill Hickok was shot in the back in Deadwood, and all things Native American as well, including a medicine man, and what used to be motel rooms shaped like teepees, as well as decorations in native styles from Florida to California, and everywhere in between. He even had Native American performers like these, with whom he posed during one of his shows, which were staged in his old Indian theater, which was later used by the Canyon Theater Guild for years of performances. He had a number of small buildings that might have been found scattered around the West, such as this tiny schoolhouse, which was reportedly acquired from a mining village, and this chapel, which was designed by famous composer Carrie Jacobs Bond, and was originally meant to be reminiscent of the chapel from the book Ramona. Inside the chapel were murals by renowned Western artist Frank Tenney Johnson. Years of heat and moisture in the old chapel have ruined the murals, but both the chapel and the schoolhouse were among the things donated by Callahan's widow to the Santa Clarita Valley Historical Society. They were restored and are on display at Heritage Junction. Fortunately, photos were preserved before they were all gone. If you go to the site now, though, you can still see many of them, including the theater still there. From the early years, Remy Nadeau ran wagons through the Soledad with goods and supplies for people in parts north. He also had a ranch in Soledad Canyon. At one point, he had a farm where he collected different types of deer and what we now call North Oaks. This impressive 2,000-acre ranch had a 1,400-acre fence, which enclosed hundreds of deer, mountain cats, tigers, and other exotic wildlife for the adventurous hunter. One of the most famous visitors to the ranch in the early 1900s was President Theodore Roosevelt. Later, the area was developed into an airport by Helm and Earl Schmidt in 1946. This used to sit at the northwest corner of what is now Soledad Canyon and White's Canyon Roads. Helm Schmidt died in 1960. The area was developed into the Santa Clarita Valley's second housing tract, North Oaks, by 1963. The people who moved into these houses would have shopped at the Solomon store. Solomon was a word made up of the names of the two canyons that joined there, Soledad and Met. Residents of Canyon Country are independent thinkers and value education, from Thomas Mitchell and his wife Martha, to the Sulphur Springs District, to Canyon High School, whose mascot is a cowboy reminiscent of the rodeo riders at the Roundup grounds, to the Canyon Country campus of the College of the Canyons. A theme of free thinking runs through this canyon, as well as the Santa Clara River. Canyon Country has always been Hollywood's back lot. Young John Wayne participated in an early Western made at the Warmuth homestead in 1912. Marlene Dietrich starred in a film shot partially at the local air park in 1938. And Little Dale Moore captured the heart of Roy Rogers in 1943 at Lang Station. Errol Flynn was undoubtedly the cleanest cowboy you ever saw at Vasquez Rocks, pointing a rifle and later holding a bow and arrow in the film The Adventures of Robin Hood. Tom Mix and Bill Hart saved the day and won the fancy of more than one maiden. Together, they starred in several hundred early motion pictures. Actors Richard Dix and Fred Kohler were famous Hollywood cowboy actors, stars of many B-Western movies. The list goes on, including Harry Carey, Hoot Gibson, Monty Montana, Johnny Mac Brown, William Boyd, Buck Jones, Gary Cooper, Clark Gable, Cesar Romero, and Ronald Reagan. Placerita Canyon was also home to Hollywood's monogram Western Town, which was purchased by Gene Autry in 1952 and renamed Melody Ranch. Today, it is best known as the site of the popular Cowboy Poetry and Music Festival held each March. And Vasquez Rocks, in particular, has been a movie locale for scores of motion pictures and television productions, including Blazing Saddles, Gunsmoke, and Star Trek, to name just a few.
Well, folks, we've seen that Canyon Country history has flourished, and the past remains a part of its future. The region changed from the original Native Americans to homesteaders that had traveled across the country to live here. They were followed by bandits that freely roamed through these valleys. Canyon Country has seen floods, fires, earthquakes. It's seen economic despair, but their tenacious ability has created a daunting endurance of sacrifice, courage, and humor. Residents have truly demonstrated a determination, self-reliance, and seeking the American dream, yet never forgetting the importance of family, friendship, and community. Although Canyon Country has grown in size and population, the small-town hospitality and open-arm welcome continues to grace all past its doorstep. Dr. Diane Van Hook, the president and superintendent of College of the Canyons, has said that if you can dream it, you can do it. What better way to think of Canyon Country, a gem of California history?